Hello, everyone. It's time to start Early Europe Section 3. And when I say Section 3, what I mean is the third PowerPoint of our study. We're going to begin with, we're going to start studying the Renaissance. And I have to give you a little bit of background information to what that means. So let's talk about what the Renaissance is. The Renaissance is defined as a cultural rebirth that occurred in Europe from roughly the 14th through the middle of the 17th centuries. So from 1300 to about 1650. Okay. This is based on the rediscovery of literature of Greece and Rome, some archaeological findings of ancient Greek and Roman statues, and a re-interest in ancient ideas and ideals. Idea and ideals. And I think that that's really important. When we're looking at the Renaissance, we're dealing with four basic important ideas. And you AP peeps really need to know this. We got four things. We got classicism, which is the focus on the classics, right? Greece and Rome. We have humanism, which is a new belief or understanding or push for the idea that man as a species is important. And when I say perfection of man, it is the idea of embracing, and remember that this is a predominantly, not even predominantly, until we get to 1505-ish, this is an entirely Catholic Europe. And so Jews were there, but Jews were forced out of a lot of places in Europe, and Jews were given very few rights in Europe. So really, Europe was a Catholic stronghold during the Renaissance. And when we talk about the perfection of man as a species, we're talking about a new Catholic belief that if God created man, then man must be important. And the humanity of man, man's choices, man's desires, man's ability to create and make things is important. And so that leads to art being important because man creates these things. In the idea of Christianity, man begins to believe that they can be closer to God, that God doesn't have to be this really scary new Old Testament wrath of God, I'm going to kill everyone sort of idea. God begins to feel more like the comforter. And the idea of religion seems less scary and less punishing and less everybody's going to hell, and becomes more comforting. And naturalism, the idea of paying attention to details and precision and trying to make things look real. Okay. And so this, if nothing else, this is one of the most important things that you can think about when you're looking at Renaissance. Okay. When we look at classical stuff, our idea is to show the importance of leaders and gods and goddesses. We had nudes and we had togas and we had actions and stuff like that. When we moved into the medieval period, we were talking about art that was used to teach, our stained glass, our paintings, learning our religion that way. People were not lifelike. People were bigger. We had that hierarchy of scale. Most of the art was religious in nature. People were fully dressed, and there were serious faces, and there was little emotion, and the background was sort of usually all one color, and it was very simple. When we move into the Renaissance, what changes there is a couple of things. Art is used to show the importance of not only religion, but also of people and of nature and of history and that sort of thing. Art becomes more lifelike and three-dimensional. Art is religious and non-religious. Some figures are clothed and some are nude. There is activity, there is motion. We have emotion, okay? The Roque and Pietà was way ahead of its time with the emotion on Mary's face. And now we get into backgrounds that show perspective. What is perspective? Is it an appearance of distance or depth in a painting in a flat surface. So this stuff is smaller back here. This stuff is bigger back up here. That we feel like we're looking at something in the distance. Okay. And so those are the basic concepts of Renaissance. Now, I got to tell you that the Renaissance is broken down into two pieces. Okay. We're going to deal with Northern Renaissance, which is like Holland, Belgium, Germany, that sort of area. And then we'll deal with the Italian Renaissance. Okay. And the idea of what goes on in both of those places is very, very, very different. So when we're looking at Northern Renaissance, what we want to talk about is the introduction of oil paint. Prior to this, we had tempera paint. That's what we've been painting with for thousands of years. And tempera paint was when you mixed a pigment of some kind with either egg whites or egg yolks that were used as a binder, held the pigment in, and then you would paint on plaster or wood, and that pigment was held by that binder that you used. Okay. But in the North, they invented a new binder, and the binder stopped being egg and started being oil. Okay. So when we think about Northern Renaissance, we have to remind ourselves that this is not just like a piece of Italian art. This is Italian influence was strong, but so was the influence of Holland and the Netherlands and of Flanders, which doesn't actually is part of Belgium. And we're looking at the difference of the two cultures. And you really need to understand this. Painting in oil was developed in the North. And then it was used in the Italian Renaissance, but it was developed in the North. And we have to really look at the differences between the two cultures. Understanding this is critical to understanding what was painted and why it was painted. Okay? In Italy, the shift to Renaissance was inspired by humanism, this idea that humans were created by God, and thus we should be thankful for all the things that humans can do. Humans can create things, humans can make art, and the things that humans make are okay, even if they're not religious, because God made man. And because God made man able to sculpt and paint and draw and build, and all of those things are okay. And it's okay that humans do things that are not always just done for the glory of God. In the North, the change was driven by religious reform. Okay, what do I mean by that? This is where we're going to start entering into the Protestant Reformation. The North is trying to return to original Christian values and against the idea that the Catholic Church at this time was wildly corrupt. And we sort of got a hint of that when we were looking at the Arena Chapel, that Enrico Scrivani believed that by building this chapel and hiring Giotto to paint it, he could buy his way out of hell. And so while the Catholic Church in Italy was sort of power hungry and trying to get popes to lead not just the church, but also countries, and working hard to make sure that the church could run not just church functions, but whole nations. People in the North said, we're not okay with that. We really like the idea of church being about God and our relationship with God. And we're not really about this whole buying your way into heaven thing. And so it changes the art that's created. And that's really important. Okay. I know I keep saying it's really important, but this time period is critical. So what are we seeing as the characteristics? Okay. These are the characteristics of Northern Renaissance. Northern Renaissance, Germany, Flanders, Belgium, Holland, Netherlands, all of that area, okay? What we're looking at here is there's an incredible attention to detail, wildly detailed. It is very realistic, okay? The North loved to paint a landscape, loved to paint landscapes. So if you're looking at a straight up landscape and it's from this time period, it was probably painted in the North. The Northern painters love to focus on regular people, the middle class, peasants. The Italians love to focus on lords and people that were in charge and emperors and stuff like that. The North liked to focus on domestic interiors, what was going on, inside homes, what the average person looked like. And these last two are really important. There is a ton of symbolism in Northern Renaissance, ton. And there is almost always a moral message. Think of it as Northern Renaissance art is sort of like the Sunday school teacher, that while you're looking at the art is tapping in the background going, excuse me, do you see the message I'm trying to teach you? That's what we need to think about when we're thinking about Northern Renaissance, okay? This is not one of your pieces. I'm really sad about it. I'm going to have to skip it this year. All right, this is your first piece. So this is the Annunciation triptych. What's a triptych? Here's your big vocabulary word. Triptych is a thing that is in three parts. And it's an altarpiece. If it folds up, it's probably painted in the north. This folds up so that this panel folds in towards the middle and this panel folds in towards the middle, and they meet in the middle and it turns into like a little square. So when it's open, it's 4 feet long. When it's closed, it's 2 feet by 2 feet. It's portable. It's something you could carry with you, okay? So if you're looking at an altarpiece, something that you would have been able to put up, and a portable altarpiece, especially, you would have been able to put it up, open, close it for mass, okay? This is small. It's 2 feet by 2 feet. So would this have been for a church or for a home? Would have been for a home. Okay, so here we see oil on wood, oil paint. Holy moly, this is a big deal. Remember how we talked about concrete changed the world? Oil paint changes the world as well. Okay, oil paint, I think I have it here. Hold on one second. Let me just see if I do. Do I have it? I don't think I do. Oh my goodness, I thought I had this whole depiction of, I do not. All right, sorry guys, give me 1 second. All right, so what do we get with oil paint? When we're dealing with oil paint, we're dealing with a new binder. And we're dealing with that idea that instead of the egg, which dries quickly, if you've ever left a scrambled, like you've mixed up an egg and left it in a bowl because you didn't eat it or whatever, and it dries and it gets all crusty, like that's what tempera paint was. So now we've moved to oil, and oil dries much slower. So it allows for fiddling with things. Oil is much more, the word is luminous. It allows, because of the way the pigment is suspended in the oil, it allows for light to bounce off the oil, and a lot of oil paintings seem to just sort of glow. The layers, while oil doesn't dry as quickly as tempera, and oil doesn't dry as quickly as fresco, but it does dry, its surface dries pretty quickly so that you can build up layers. And the more layers of paint you have when you're dealing with oil paint, the more dimension or depth it gives. It's very subtle, and it allows for unbelievable detail. Some of these Northern Renaissance painters could paint with 1 or 2 hairbrushes and just put in the most amazing details. So let's look at this. This is clearly portable. This is from the workshop of Robert Campin. And what we have to talk about is when we're looking at workshop of, and we'll see that a lot in the Renaissance, that there is a main artist who has other apprentice artists that come and do other pieces of it. So we believe that this was created in Robert Campin's workshop, but we don't believe that he is the only one that worked on it, okay? When we're looking at this oil paint, we're looking at just this ability to show so many important details. This was the triptych of an upper middle class family. We can see in this panel over here that it is the patron and his wife. And so why is he painted into this? Because he is worshiping he is praying about and thinking about the Virgin Mary and the angel Gabriel, and he's showing his respect. And interesting about this is a modern day scene back here behind him. This is modern day, like modern day Dutch scene or Flemish scene. So is this back here behind Joseph, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We see him, he was painted first, we know, and she was painted after. So originally he was the only one. We assume she was added after he married her. And so he's kneeling in respect. We see him there, and we see him looking through this door into the center panel. But we notice that there's not a door here to let him in. This is an important thing. We also see this guy over here that appears to be in a room, but that also doesn't appear to be connected to this center section. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So let's look at the middle panel here. Do I have just the middle panel? No, I do not. All right, so let's look at the middle panel. Here we have the Virgin Mary. Okay, she's laying on the ground. There's a little star shape right here over, if she stood up, what would be clearly her stomach or her womb. Okay, and this is the angel Gabriel coming to make the announcement to her that she will be the son of, she will have the Son of God. She will become pregnant, and she will give birth to the Son of God. And what's interesting, as we look at this picture, we see several important things. We see that she has a book open in front of her. And with that book that's open in front of her, we also see a scroll. This book implies New Testament. The scroll implies Old Testament. We see the Jewish tallit over here. Okay, that's important too. That's a very Jewish symbol, because we have to remind ourselves that Mary and Joseph were Jews. There was no Christianity yet. And so the angel Gabriel appears to Mary and says that she will have the Son of God. And we see some important things going on here. Okay, so I'm going to sort of scroll in a little bit. We see the flowers, and it's crazy. The flowers have 3 buds. 3 is a big number in Christianity, the Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So 3 is a big deal. Okay, and so here we have 3 buds on the flower. The flower is a lily, which is the symbol of purity. And we have to remind ourselves that she is always referred to as the Virgin Mary. Okay, so she has the baby Jesus without ever having sex with anyone. And that is important too. That is indicative of why there is no door between Joseph's area and Mary's area. Okay, she is pure. Her womb is pure. Okay, we see a thing of water, and the towel has the decoration of the tallit on it, but it's also a towel. It hints at the use of water in baptism. And we see the candle here that is, again, important, the light of Christ, the light of inspiration, the light of God. God creates light out of darkness. Okay, so we're going to scroll in and we're going to look a little bit more at Mary. Here we see her reading. And we see that she has a fireplace behind her, but there's a screen here. Okay, and Mary is blocking the ability for there to be fire. Mary and her womb block the entrance to hell. Through Christ and Mary, you don't have to go to hell. You can believe in them and not go to hell. That's the symbolism that's in this picture. Okay. I'm going to scroll a little bit more to show some more Mary symbolism. So here's that New Testament book and the Old Testament scroll, the candle. Now look at the fact that the candle is out. We have some thinking to do about that candle. The candle's out, the light of Christ, but this is also a hint at the idea that Christ will die. And we see this is a crazy thing. We see the window here is not open, but we see this angel coming through with the cross. This is the infant Jesus. That is, when we look at this image, okay, he's coming in through this window, and if you follow the line, it goes papow right there at her womb. And so this is the idea that the angel is able to fly through the closed window with the symbol of Christ and into her closed womb and impregnate her with the baby Jesus. It's very symbolic. There's lots of stuff that hints at what is going on here. The fact that there are no doors, the fact that she blocks the entrance, the fact that the star is over her, what would be if she stood up her womb. The angel infant baby Jesus flies through the closed window without breaking it. So there's all this imagery, and like I said, lots of symbolism in the North. So much symbolism. We're going to look at this panel right here. This is Joseph. Okay, we remember that Joseph is the earthly father of Christ, but he is not the one that impregnates Mary. God, through the Holy Spirit, does that. And so we see Joseph over here in his little room by himself. Okay, and so we see him with hammer and nails. And those hammer and nails that he has are meant to make us think about the passion of Christ, the fact that he will be nailed to the cross. This long saw gives us sort of the image of the spear that punctures Christ's side. And what you see Joseph working on is actually a mousetrap. And a mousetrap at this time period was sort of symbolic of the devil. You were trying to trap the devil. And so that's what he's building. He's building a trap for the devil. Mary is keeping you out of hell. Joseph is helping to build your mousetrap to catch the evil. And so while it doesn't seem like it is some big, complex, complicated thing, it really is. This is a very complex picture that shows us Joseph and Mary. It depicts it in what would have been the modern time period, but it makes people feel their connection. It allows them to have that personal, emotional connection to their faith. And it makes God and Mary and Jesus feel more approachable. Okay. So symbols. All righty. So symbolism, multi-panels. Here's our guys. All righty. Okay, moving on to our next piece. So this is a very interesting piece, also oil on wood. When you paint on wood, you have to do some painting on the front and the back. You have to paint the back because if you don't paint the back, it will warp. So some ancient paintings have just one color that is painted on the back to seal it up. Some paintings, some images on wood have a whole second painting on the back that you could look at if you wanted to. So when we're looking at this piece, it's called the Arnolfini portrait. It is by a man named Jan van Eyck, and he is considered one of the most important Northern Renaissance painters of all time. He's really like your guy. You got him and Bruegel, and we'll talk about Bruegel in a little bit, but they're really like your super important guys. And what you're looking at is what people of my age were taught was called the Arnolfini wedding. It is now called the Arnolfini portrait because as we do more research, and that is what art historians do, they do research. When art historians do research, what they figure out is that some stuff that they thought was real wasn't. And we talked about things changing their names. We talked about the fact that we hate that the Venus of Willendorf is called the Venus of Willendorf. And so a lot of people call her the Woman of Willendorf. Okay. People my age were taught this was the Arnolfini wedding. And art historians have done a whole bunch of studying, and they have figured out that this is unlikely a wedding, and that it is more likely to actually be a portrait that accomplishes something else. And I'm going to tell you what the ideas are for what it is supposed to stand for, and I'll tell you about the one that is considered to be the most commonly believed right now. So let's talk about who Arnolfini was. Arnolfini worked for the Medici family. The Medici family is like the most important family in Italy during the Renaissance. Lorenzo Medici it is like so important. There are almost not words for how important he is. And so Arnolfini here works for the Medici family. Arnolfini lives in Bruges, which is in Belgium. And he lives there in Bruges, but he works for the Medici family, who does lots of importing and exporting and sales and stuff like that. And so when we're looking at this, we see that Arnolfini is incredibly wealthy and well-traveled. Here we have Arnolfini in his, great little fur coat. We see some oranges on the window ledge, which the only way you could get oranges in Bruges is if you were well-traveled. And so, we see this use of some of our background pieces here, that red silk, the complex mirror, the beautiful candelabra. And so we're looking at all of this, and we know that he is very, very wealthy. And we can see that this is his wife. And he's a real person. And he had this painted. And so what we're looking at when we look at her, I want to talk about this. This in the front is there were a lot of dresses at the beginning that were very puffy and bulgy and stuff like that. And so, but it's also possible that it is meant to symbolize pregnancy. So let's look at what we're looking at. So we have a couple of things here. We have this mirror, and the reason that I want to focus on this mirror here is look at this mirror, and in this mirror you can see that we see the back of the wife, we see the back of Arnolfini, we see actually right here in the mirror Jan van Eyck. He paints himself into the painting. And so when we scroll back, we look, and here's this mirror, and in this mirror reflected is Jan van Eyck. This is not a big piece. This is 3 feet by 2 feet. It's not giant. And when you look at this mirror, I want you to scroll in and look at the detail. Here's this mirror, and the mirror has the Stations of the Cross, the Passion of Christ, and each one of those little roundels, each one of those little medallions has an important piece of the story of Christ. Look at how detailed they are. Some of them 1 or 2 hairs, brush hairs, width of detail. You can see that we have these beads here, and they have these little tiny white dots on them that make them look like they are reflecting light. We can see the light reflected off of the candelabra. We can see the light reflected off of the edge of the mirror. This says Jan van Eyck was here. I mean, really, that's what it says. And it's dated 1434, the year that he painted it. So we look at the all of the stuff here. Look at the candelabra. There's only 1 candle. Okay. Again, that's important. That idea of the light of Christ. So we're going to scroll. Notice that they have their shoes off. What does shoes off signify? Signifies holy ground. We're going to see him holding her hand, but in the background we see this really scary kind of monster-y thing, and the lion down here. At her feet we see a dog, which is the symbol of fidelity and being faithful to someone. And what you're looking at here is there's also a statue right up here on the top of the bedpost that is a statue of Saint Margaret. And Saint Margaret is the patron saint of childbirth. Now, here's the deal. When you first look at it, people think that this is a wedding portrait, right? He is holding her hand. She's standing there. They've taken their shoes off, so they're having some sort of holy thing, right? But then when you start looking at it, you begin to believe that it might not be a wedding. And the reason that people begin to believe that it might not be a wedding are some weird things that are happening. The idea of the hinting at the pregnancy is the first one. But the really big stuff is the painting of Saint Margaret up here. The fact that the rug of all things is pulled over to the side here. Because when you move your carpet to the side of the bed there like that in this time period, it is actually significant of symbolizing the person who had slept on that side of the bed and is no longer there. They're missing. So we see this really scary monster. We see Saint Margaret. we see holy ground. Okay, we see her pregnancy, and we actually know that she dies in childbirth. We know that. We know that Arnolfini's wife dies in childbirth. And so what we are now beginning to believe, and the reason that it has changed its name and we're now calling it the Arnolfini portrait, is we actually believe that this is now a memorial piece to his wife who had just recently died in childbirth. And suddenly all of these things make a little more sense. The passion of the Christ being on the mirror, like the idea that those are the steps of leading up to Christ's death. The one candle signifying the light of Christ, the holy ground to show that like she is gone. All of these things lead art historians to believe that actually that is what this is. This is a memorial piece, especially when you really zoom in and you see these monsters that are right over top of her hand. And it's really the symbolism of it as people are doing more and more studying of this. They believe that this is actually a memorial portrait for his dead wife. All right. So here we are. We're talking about the not ancient. We're talking about Northern Renaissance. We're talking about symbolism. And when I tell you that like Northern Renaissance and symbolism is a big deal, I cannot express to you what a big deal it is. So the Protestant Reformation, and I have to talk about that as a way to understand what was going on. The Protestant Reformation happens really with the idea of going against the Catholic Church. And the reason that there is this concept of going against the Catholic Church is because like I said, they were corrupt. And so what you see in the North, is that protest against the Catholic Church. All right. So here we have Adam and Eve by Albrecht Dürer, 1504. It's an engraving. And we're going to talk about engraving on copper plates here for a second. All right. So what you do with a copper plate engraving is you have to cut your image in reverse. Okay, so you have a copper plate. That's what this would have been used for. Had a copper plate, and you would have had to cut your image in the reverse order, because then you would ink over top of your image and then print it on paper. And so when you do that, if you don't do it the other way around, you end up with really with just a mirror. You end up with a mirror image. So you have to carve it onto the plate. Otherwise, you have to carve it onto the plate in reverse order. Otherwise, you'll end up with mirror image. So it's a very, very difficult process. You cut with a little tool called a burin. You carve it into the middle plate. Then ink is pressed onto it, and the paper is applied, and it is then pulled up. It is remarkably detailed. It requires remarkable amount of preciseness, because if you make one tiny mistake, you could ruin all of your shading. This particular engraving it was influenced by classical sculpture, and when I say that, I mean the picture of Adam there. It looks like what's called the Apollo Belvedere, which was owned by the Medicis. It's a Greek statue. And then Eve looks like a statue of Venus that the Medicis also owned. Now, it's interesting that we see a nude here. And the nude is okay here because it is Adam and Eve and they are in the garden. And so that is why they're covered with the leaves, because they learn, that this is literally just an instant before Adam and Eve eat of the tree of knowledge and are cast out of the out of the Garden of Eden. And so what you see here is you see Eve, you see Adam trying to convince her not to do, not to do whatever. You see not to eat from the tree of knowledge. And you see all of these animals around. And each of the animals is sort of indicative of a particular thing that's going on. So this is a little bit closer up. You can see this ram up here. He's sort of scary looking. You see the cat, you see the mouse. Now, if I told you before that Joseph was building a mouse trap to catch the devil, then the mouse is significant. The mouse stands for the devil. Here you see some oxen, the parrot, you see the leaves and the snake. So we see all of these things. We see a rabbit. The cat is symbol. It's a whole idea of the four humors of the body, and the four humors having to be in check, so that you don't have one too many emotions. So the cat is one of the humors. He represents the humor of anger. Okay, the rabbit represents energy. The elk here represents being sad. And the ox represents being tired. Okay? And so we see the four humors of the body. And everybody is doing fine because this is right before the fall. Okay? The parrot is a symbol of being clever. Why? Because parrots, you could train them to talk and say things. And so here we see the parrot being clever and sort of trying to convince them not to do these terrible things. But what you see also is, please see the beauty and the detail of what we're looking at here. Okay, so we're looking to make sure I got them all. Blah, 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 blah. Persons, the bull, the rabbit, the elk, the cat, the mouse. Oh, I forgot about the mountain goat. The mountain goat up here is symbolic of like lust and going to hell. All right, so let's look at it. So you can see these little teeny tiny details. So where you see that it's white is where he indented the copper plate. Where you see that it's black is where he left part of the copper plate poking up. And so you can see how many details there are on this little teeny tiny lines of pushing. This is a very exact artistic thing. Durer is considered to be the greatest printmaker of all time. He did woodcuts, he did engravings. He is considered to be the greatest maker of prints and woodcuts in all of Europe and ever in all of time. And when you look at it, I want you to look at this little tiny bird, this slightly less tiny bird, okay, and the mountain goat. And now I'm going to scroll back out and look at it's exacting detail, and it's only 10 inches by 8 inches. So when I tell you that the Northern Renaissance is all about detail, it's all about detail. And so biblical stories are really important in the North because they are trying to get back to the idea of religion for the love of God and the idea of religion for the sake of religion. As opposed to religion for trying to buy your way into heaven. And so it's really important that we see here the lessons that Durer is trying to teach us with this piece. All right, so that's the end of the first video on Northern Renaissance. I'm going to end that video for now, and I will make another Northern Renaissance video for the second half of the Northern Renaissance. All right, I'll see you soon.